I got a question. I think your arguments when it comes to the Trinity were, very poor. When it comes to relative identity, the analogy that you gave is very brute and like it has no justification. When it comes to like synchronic context, right? So what you were
When it
doing
comes to
is
what?
you were when it comes to like synchronic context.
So, say that a little slower for me, man.
When it comes to synchronic contexts,
Synchronic context.
yes, you are appealing to RI when it comes to diachronic contexts, okay? But you would not be able to do the same with synchronic context. So essentially, like, it's gonna be the case that a diachronic context is gonna be a context pertaining to a statement within time, okay? But since God is atemporal, or like we can say timeless, right? It will not apply to the Trinity, the analogy that you gave.
So this Muslim is trying to argue that the ship of Theseus example for relative identity, which just says like if you have a ship, it keeps being replaced in its parts. Is it the same ship that from 10 days ago with its original pieces of wood that made it up? This Muslim's trying to say, well, that analogy doesn't work because that's a diachronic context, and he says that's within time, but that's not how a diachronic context is defined. A diachronic context is when you measure distinct slices of time, right? You take slice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like you take, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12. And then you see if the identity is the same over time, right? So it's not just something within time, right? It's multiple slices of time. And he then opposes that to a synchronic context. He says God is timeless, therefore you can't apply diachronic context to him. And then he opposes a diachronic context to what he thinks is a synchronic context, which is out of time. It's completely false. A synchronic context is still a measurement within time. It's just a single slice of time. Now, can we apply these to God? Well, yes, we can. Because both diachronic and synchronic contexts don't commit you to saying God is in time. It's just from the human's perspective a measurement of time of which we can measure whether or not something's identity has stayed the same. You can have an atemporal being, but from the side of creatures, time passes, and I can say God was the same today as he was yesterday, right? That's a diachronic context of which I'm clearly applying to God. So what he's saying is just nonsense. He's making up his own idiosyncratic definitions of diachronic and synchronic. Synchronic is within time. That doesn't mean the objects that you're investigating are within time, right? It doesn't commit you to like synchronic being a property of an object or something, like he's treating it that way. That's just completely false.
Okay, but I don't. Yeah,
Is
I don't
that
know what those words mean, man.
yeah? So
I'm not a big philosopher.
let me break it down. So you giving the example of like the ship, the Titanic. When it went and then it got, it crashed. Is it the same ship or whatnot? That was the analogy, correct?
Yeah, is it the same ship that left? Right? Yeah. Is it identical?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So see, the thing is, the problem with that, God is atemporal. It's a synchronic context. So you cannot appeal to RI. And the general
But
problem I have with RI is that you cannot account for an identity statement.
yeah, so why doesn't it work with God if the three persons are grounded in the same essence, they have the same nature, but yet they are distinct from each other? Why can't that work? Why can't relative identity
because
work with them?
because God is atemporal, so there is no necessity for appealing to RI. The more intelligible
Appeal into what?
because when you appeal to RI, relative identity, you cannot account for an identity statement. There's going to be no objective
What?
like criteria that we
Why
can
not?
actually adhere to.
Now, this is just stupid. He says relative identity cannot account for an identity statement. I mean, Who says something like this? Of course, you can account for an identity statement. By account here, he clearly just means like a criteria for identity. The point is that sortals have distinct criterions for identity. For example, to be in the God sortal, you need the omni properties, right? To be in the human sortal, you need rationality, right? To be in a plant sortal, you need, plant qualities. It's the same for anything, even for absolute identity, right? Absolute identity itself doesn't tell you what counts as a property. Different objects have different identity criteria, right? So you might say for absolute identity, humans have a set of essential properties, whatever, that make them human, right? But those same essential properties don't make a car. So there's different identity criterion. So he's acting as if relative identity has no criterion at all. I mean, does he not think that, logicians who've been dealing with this would deal with this like extremely simple like objection like that's the very foundation of why you create a new logical identity operator, identity interpreter.
Why not?
How would you? Okay, if you're gonna relativize everything and this is what happens when under relative identity. How can you account for an identity statement? When it comes to absolute identity, you have a fixed criteria, but that's not the case when it comes to RI. That's why we say it's ad hoc.
Comes to absolute identity, you have fixed criterion. No, you don't. You don't know. Absolute identity doesn't tell you what makes a human, right? It doesn't tell you what counts as a property. It doesn't give you identity conditions for a individual thing, right? The most you can say is just the indiscernibles of identity, the identity of indiscernibles, which doesn't tell you what individual objects have as their own identity conditions. It's the same thing. It's just an unrestricted domain of which substitution ranges over. And that's really the only difference. But it doesn't tell you, what makes a car a car. I won't know, absolute identity doesn't tell me that cars have doors.
So you can't be, wouldn't the grounding be that they are identical in their essence? That's the grounding of their identity, like what they're identical in?
Them being one in essence is not like a sufficient criteria to be one being.
Why not?
Like something being one in essence is not a sufficient criteria.
Yeah, I'm not understanding why not.
Because all we mean when we say essence, and you would agree with me with this, right? That an essence would just be like a set of essential properties, basically, right? So a set of essential properties being shared would just constitute that they are the same type of thing. Does not mean that the
No, we would not agree with him. Properties inhere in essences, right? They come forth from the essence. They inhere in substances. So no, we would not agree with you. His own Islamic tradition doesn't even agree with him. Standard Islam does not define an essence as a set of essential properties. That is completely false. And Godlogic's answer is actually correct, saying that they share the same essence is sufficient for grounding that identity relation.
it doesn't necessarily entail
Not
the
if the
same
thing
being.
not if the thing they are is indivisible.
I'm sorry?
Not if it's indivisible. That means that it's
you
not a type or a what do you guys call it? Like the essence of God is not divisible. It can't be split, or you can't have multiple things that are God.
The thing in question is whether the Trinity entails multiple gods. So we're trying to test that out. You would agree with me that the persons are discernible, correct?
Yes.
Okay, if the persons are discernible, and the criteria that we have when it comes to identity, classical identity, would be counting by discernibility, correct?
Sorry, say it again. Counting by what?
The criteria that we use in classical identity would be by discernibility.
Okay.
Okay, so the problem that we have with the Trinity is that it's going to be the case that the persons are discernible, and we count by discernibility when it comes to classical identity. Therefore, insofar as the personhood, we can say that there are three gods insofar as the personhood.
No, because there wouldn't be three gods in their person. It'd just be three persons, not three gods. Now you're counting something else.
A lot of Muslims have been saying this phrase, we count by discernibility. It's just nonsense, especially in the way that he's using it. All he means here is that when there's property difference, there's two things, right? Like, whatever. I'm not going to argue with that right now, but the way he's applying it is especially incorrect in this case, right? He's saying amongst the persons, there's property difference, and so there's distinctness of persons. Okay, fine. There's the distinct hypostases are differentiated by, paternity, the Father, and sonship in the Son, right? Or being begotten in the Son. So they're distinct persons, right? So he's counting persons, but then Godlogic correctly catches that he's distinguishing persons and he's collapsing person and being into one thing so that he can, when he distinguishes persons, he can just act like he's done some metaphysical work to conclude that there's three gods when he literally is just using person and being synonymously, which is completely non-standard, right? Even as in Islamic metaphysics, it's just completely non-standard to do that. And he's acting as if he's doing some like real argumentative work when it's just sophistry and wordplay.
Yeah, but classical LPT, you know that we would say that the Trinity, you have three persons, they're distinct from each other, and they are all truly God. So individually, you would say, so when we say the Son is truly God by identity, and the Father is truly God by identity, correct?
He says when we run classical LPT, he's saying we formalize it with identity. Okay, there's multiple ways to formalize the Trinity in a formal system. Just because you can formalize it with identity in one way doesn't mean you can't formalize it with predicates, doesn't mean you can't formalize it with relative identity. It doesn't mean that there isn't other types of ways to formalize it. So that point is just completely irrelevant.
Yeah, but they're not discernible in their essence.
The problem with that is like when we say an essence, it's an abstract thing.
Okay.
We can't say that they are, what do you say? They're discernible in their essence. You can't.
Yeah, they're not discernible in their essence.
Yeah, you can't because see, an essence is just abstract. So we speak about of the subjects.
Saying the essence is abstract has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not we can count it. I mean, there's Platonists who believe numbers are abstract, but they still count, multiple number ones or multiple tens, right? It's abstract. You can still count them as distinct things. So that has absolutely nothing to do with, the topic, and he's just trying to obfuscate, and constantly he's shifting his argument.
We don't count God by essence. We count God by personhood, by the subjects that possess that essence.
Wait, so let's say, like, for example, the polytheists, right? You say that they have multiple gods, right? They're polytheists. They believe in multiple gods because they believe that there are multiple divisible divine beings, actual divine beings. Okay, so with polytheism, they believe in multiple divine beings, which is why it's polytheism. They believe in, that, and they can believe one of their gods has a different essence that is more powerful, whatever, one weaker, doesn't matter, but they believe in multiple divine beings, right? So
yeah. So the reason we say it's beings is because there's multiple persons. That's why. As insofar as my model of God.
wait, being is equal to personhood?
Actually, that's a very interesting point. But
so here the sophistry has come in full effect. He's saying, because being is just person in my model. No, it's not. Like he's saying he can't delineate between the whatness of God, the quiddity, and the person of God, the who. He's saying there's literally no difference. That is absolutely non-standard in Islamic metaphysics. He's just creating idiosyncratic terms. He's trying to collapse the way terms are standardly used. And basically, he just admitted this entire time he was just question begging because he doesn't actually have an argument. He's just been using person and being as synonyms. and then obfuscating. And then so when you count distinct persons, of course you're going to count distinct beings because he's just using them as synonyms. This guy is an absolute sophist.
You know, who is the first person that actually implemented like a person being distinction?
I have no idea.
It's Lactantius, who's a Roman Christian author. Do you know who adopted this idea from, of a person being distinction?
No idea.
From the Egyptian pagans. So hypostases and ousia used to be synonymous, actually.
Yeah.
So the final part of his sophistry is just blatantly like getting historical facts incorrect. He says Lactantius is the first person to differentiate person from being. That's false. You had Origen and Tertullian who were distinguishing person from being. And he's just up there saying this to Godlogic because he knows Godlogic doesn't study things like this. And he's just, honestly, I think he's just lying